Hello, everyone. So this is the last time we have a talk around money and finances, and I've got a very special guest with me. I've got Jamie Smart, who's a Sunday Times bestselling author, exec coach, and speaker. Welcome, Jamie.
Oh, it's great to be here, Pete. Lovely to see you.
Thanks. So we're here to talk about money, really, and I just wanted to pick Jamie's brains, around the subject because I know for the group itself and the wider audience, I'm sure everyone will resonate. What are your feelings around money? And also, lots of the people that we speak to, our clients, the wider audience, they seem to have a lot of worry around, that particular topic, whether it's the next paycheck, going into a different role. So, for example, giving up the day job and doing something they dream about. But the one hurdle always seems to be, wow, I would do it if it didn't have any fears or issues around, how much money is in my bank, those kind of things.
Yeah, it's such, and what I should say, Pete, is that I, while I've explored the domain of money and my thinking around money and my beliefs around money and made lots of changes and discoveries and realizations over the years around that, and it's made a big difference to me as well, and I'm really grateful for that. I don't want to put myself forward as a financial expert or a money expert or I don't know, Mr. Moneybags or anything like that. I'm just the reason I started exploring this actually was I used to have a full time job, and always had the kind of the just the feeling that I wanted to do my own thing. I'd always had that feeling, but I didn't believe it was possible for me. And just to give you a, a contrast, when I was in my early 20s, I had a friend who was a multimillionaire property owner. So he would buy properties and rent them out and that sort of thing. So he had a huge property portfolio, very wealthy guy. And you know what they say about being around people who have money, you can learn from them, and it rubs off and that sort of thing. That's not what happened to me. I was with this, hanging out with this guy. We go out drinking and that sort of thing. But I was kind of envious of him. And my at that time when I was in my early 20s, my most leveraged or enlightened thinking about money in relation to him as, gee, I sure wish he'd give me some of that. So I didn't have any sense of that being possible for me. So I wanted to say that because I feel like I started from a really, as far as money was concerned, my understanding of it was really, really limited. I kind of felt like I had employment DNA, and the
Hmm.
money you got was the money that your paycheck gave you, and that was how you made money. And I guess you could sell some stuff at a garage sale, but that was that like I was not someone who had what you would call wealthy thinking or enlightened thinking. And that didn't even look like beliefs to me, Pete. That just looked like reality. That was the reality of life, and that was the reality of me. And some people were lucky because they were born with rich DNA, and some
Hmm.
people were unlucky and like me, and that was that. And so I just say that to kind of set the context. And then a couple of things happened, and one was I was employed right up until I was in my early 30s, and at this time a lot of my friends, I was in the computer uh, industry, so I was a computer project manager doing computers in publishing companies and that sort of thing. And so I was around a lot of people who were contractors, contract project managers, contract programmers, that sort of thing. And a lot of these folks were pulling down big money. Like I remember there being a guy who was an Oracle programmer on a project I was running. And I was earning, a certain amount a year, not huge, but doing okay. But this guy was earning £800 a day for rocking up and coding Oracle forms. This is like in, I don't know, 1994 or something. And I was kind of like, holy moly. And there were a number of these guys, but here's the thing I noticed, Pete. a lot of these guys would never go on holiday. They would never go on a training course or anything like that. And when you ask them why, I'd say, why don't you go on holiday? It's like, cost me 800 pounds a day to go on holiday before I've even booked the plane. And I
Wow.
could tell, well, there's something wrong with how that guy's thinking about it. But then there was something wrong with how I was thinking about it too, because I thought, well, there's no way I could do that because there's
Mhm.
something different about me. So anyway, I ended up going contract. I had an insight. I went on a training course. I had an insight. Oh, you can do whatever you put your mind to, or you can give it a go. So I quit my job, got a contract, then I quit my job, uh, and started training and learning because I was developing for a new career. But I was on a course one day, course not to do with money, of course to do with like hypnosis, and met a guy there who really seemed to have his act together financially. He was well off and that sort of thing, working as a consultant. And he said, and we were talking about money, and he said, well, money is 80% psychology, 20% tactics. And I said, you what? He
Mhm.
said, money is 80% psychology, 20% tactics. And I had never thought of that before. I thought that money was either how wealthy your parents were, or how hard you worked, or how lucky you were, or if you had wealthy DNA or something like that. But the idea that money was your money situation was 80% psychology, that got my attention. And I didn't know if it was true or not, Pete. But I thought, if that is true, your psychology can change. Like, in a way, your psychology has a lot less substance to it than, you know, uh, this hole punch does, or
Mhm.
these glasses do, or some bricks do. Your psychology can change like that. Like, you can have an insight, or
Yeah.
see something differently, or learn something, or whatever. So I thought, what if that's true? What if it really is 80% psychology? So I started exploring the domain of money and looking to get new psychology around money. And that has happened to some degree. I wouldn't say I've got, like, you can always tell what someone's psychology around money is because it's reflected in their everything from how much money they have and how much leverage they have and all that sort of stuff. So
Mhm.
if someone's, it gets reflected very quickly
Mhm.
into your circumstances, in my experience anyway. So that was kind of my journey to finding out about this stuff.
It's interesting when you say about psychology around money. We've obviously met people with lots of money. You meet them through your life. But
Mhm.
interestingly, some of them are not so happy. But then when you
Mhm.
haven't got money, you're always like, I'll be happy when I've got X amount in the bank. So it's exactly that. From one day to the next, you can completely change the way you feel about it. And once you realize that it's just feelings around, you know, the subject of money, then that's when it gets really interesting. Because like you
Mm.
said before, if you've got a fixed mind around it, then that's kind of what you're going to get back.
And it's interesting, Pete, because the in general, and anyone who's watching or listening to this, you can check this for yourself. Your thinking and feeling around money doesn't look like thinking and feeling. It looks real. It looks like that's the way it is. And so even the stuff I'm saying, people may be listening and going, oh, but I've got this much in the bank. And if I've got this much in the bank, then I can do this. Whereas I
Mhm.
remember once I was on a training, I was teaching a training course. And and in those days, I would start off by kind of going around the room. If it was a small group, like 20 people or something, I'd go around the room and I'd ask them a couple of questions. I'd ask them, you've come on this program, we've got some time together. So if I could wave a magic wand and you have anything the way you want it to be, what would you like to have happen? And how will you know it's happened? How will you know you got what you came for? And
Mhm.
so everyone would, one person says, oh, I'd lose some weight. The next person says, I'd, start my career as a public speaker. So I'm going around the room and this guy says, I want to have 2.1 million pounds in the bank. And I was like, that's a very specific number. tell me more. Why? What for? What do you want to do with it? He said, oh, I don't want to do anything with it. I just want it to sit there in the bank. I said, how come? He goes, well, I've calculated that 2.1 million pounds is the amount of money I need to have in the bank before I can feel a sense of security.
Mhm.
I said, pal, feel free to make however much money you like and have as much as you like sitting in the bank. But there's no amount of money in the world that can give you a feeling of security, because that's not where security comes from. Feelings of security come from thought in the moment. Just like every other feeling, we're always living in the feeling of thought in the moment. We're never ever feeling anything other than that, but it often seems like we are. So
Mhm.
you'll, like you said, I sometimes work with extremely wealthy people, and there's no causal connection between money and well-being, money and happiness. There's causal connection between money and physical, physical stuff you can do, like circumstantial stuff in the world. But there's no money in the world that can give you a feeling. And I know for most people listening, that may sound insane, because if I talk to a group and say, but this is well proven, there's a famous research paper where they examined the medium term effects of events on people. One of the events they examined was winning a large sum on the lottery, and
Mhm.
the other event they examined was being made paraplegic and confined to a wheelchair. And they followed up with people a year after the thing happened, whether it was winning the lottery or ending up in a wheelchair. And in every case, people's felt experience of life was the same a year later as it had been before the thing happened. So if they were generally miserable before they won the lottery, they were generally miserable after they won the lottery. If they were generally miserable before they got confined to a
Mhm.
wheelchair, they were generally miserable a year later. And if they were happy and contented and generally had a decent sense of well-being before they were confined to a wheelchair, they had that a year later. And same with the lottery. Now here's the interesting thing, Pete. It doesn't look like that would make sense. Like in our brains
Mhm.
is what's called hedonic forecasting. We're actually, as human beings, we're surprisingly terrible at predicting how we're going to feel when future things happen, and we think we're really good at it. It's like, hang on a second, let me check. No, I'm really good. I got really scared at that terrible thing. It's like, no, and I'll often say to groups, I'll say, who's ever had something happen that you were terrified that it might happen, and then it happened and you were okay? And a whole bunch of people put up their hand. I'll go, whoever had something happen where they were really looking forward to it and it was going to be the best thing ever, and then it was rubbish? Load of people put up their hand. Who's ever, we go through all the permutations. There's no causal connection
No.
between money or certain circumstances and how you're going to feel, because you're always going to feel thought in the moment.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And like you say, how many times have you gone out, been really excited, and when you've had times in your life when you've got enough money to do certain things that put in this box of, oh, I'm going to feel great when this happens, and then you might have a good time, but that really dissipates quickly because again, you know, your well-being, your happiness, it's not connected to money or an activity or a thing. You have to start inside yourself, and I think that's the thing, as you said before. If you've got a generally a positive mindset, if you win the lottery, you're probably going to have a great time. Whereas if you've always been a bit negative and always felt like you've had really bad luck, then I'm pretty sure you could, you know, really focus on some of the negative things, whether you've got 2 million in the bank or, not so much. So,
Well, when they follow up with people who have won the lottery, it's really interesting how those people see. The thing is, if your money situation is 80% psychology, I remember. I, I don't know if it's me that says this or I got this from someone else. If I got it from someone else, it would be Robert Kiyosaki. A guy called Robert Kiyosaki wrote a couple of really good books. One was Rich Dad Poor Dad, and the other one's called The Cash Flow Quadrant, which was excellent. And either he said this or I said this. he's I think it might have been him. He said, "Money is an amplifier. Whatever your beliefs around money are, if you get more money, it's going to amplify or magnify those beliefs." So, and I had a really good example of this. You know, when I was first living in the UK, because I grew up in Canada, moved to the UK when I was 20, and I had a job as a computer operator. So this is like 1986, and I had a job that paid me £6,300 a year, and every month I was like 60 or 70 pounds overdrawn. So there was 60 or 70 pounds less money than there was month each month. And later, like 1999, 1990, no, 1997, something like that, 98, 98. So I had just gone contracting and I was earning more money than I had ever thought possible. So I was earning like, I don't know, I was charging, when I first started contracting, I was charging out at about £600 a day, that's a lot of money.
Hmm.
And I was still overdrawn at the bank. I was invoicing and getting paid each month. They were paying on time and everything. They were putting in tons of cash into my, but I expanded my expenditure so I could stay in debt. And it was really interesting. At a certain point, when this guy said to me, money is, 80% psychology and 20% tactics. I looked at it and I realized that adding more money had just amplified all my dodgy money behaviors and money beliefs and that sort of thing. So I was like, "Oh man, you got to get a handle on this." And so I started looking at it, and I realized that I was just in the habit of spending more than I earned. It was just a habit. Like my level where I said, "Okay, I've spent enough," happened to be 10% further than what I'd earned or whatever. So I said, "Okay, cut that out." And I, paid off my credit cards, and I got out of debt, and I just decided I don't do that anymore.
Hmm.
And that was a good decision. Like yeah, that made a difference. Um, but what I discovered, Pete, was just so much of my thinking around money, which looked real, was actually just totally bonkers and made up. It was
Yeah, I
inherited
agree.
from
It really feels,
other people. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
totally.
Especially at the time, I've been lucky enough. I've never been super rich or had millions in the bank, but I've been comfortable before.
Mm.
And I've also had zero in the bank or negative. And weirdly enough, I actually felt better when I had nothing. Although, it- when you haven't got money, you're always really chasing it, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
I think you really need to, put a foundation down. And I think that's the thing. Regardless of what's going on, you need a starting point and realizing, where does happiness come from? And once
Mm.
you realize it's, connected to feelings, that's when it gets really interesting. Because if you keep driving forward and you haven't resolved that part, then it's really, really difficult to then resolve the other issue, isn't it?
Yeah, and I find that a lot. I'll often work with people who thought that if they earned X amount or created this much success or that sort of thing, then they would finally be happy, contented, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're kind of dazed and bewildered to discover it doesn't work that way. To discover experientially, it's like, man, I've been working my ass off for 20 years, and now that I'm finally there, I feel pretty much exactly the same way I did last week. What's the deal here? So the reason it's so valuable is you can then, instead of looking to money to give you a feeling, you can let money assume its rightful place and do what it's actually for, which is for buying stuff. Like that's
Giving you options to do
yeah.
things.
Well,
Yeah.
it, and it's amazing how many things you can actually do. That like I'll often ask people, what if they could have anything they want? How would if they had all the money in the world? What would they
Mhm.
do? And it's amazing how many of the things they put on their list are things that don't actually cost much. I go for walks in the woods every day.
Yeah,
I
it's amazing how many
no,
things that we're actually stopping ourselves on a daily basis by doing. Yeah, isn't it strange that when you ask people, if you had a magic wand, if there's no barriers, just you had a reset button, and you could have everything you want. And there's a lot of things on those lists that are completely have no connection with money at all. that we can just go out and do. And especially when it comes to happiness, and I've spent the time doing that, over the years as well. I'll be happy when I get a better job or,
Mm.
more secure because I need this and that. And when I realize that actually the starting point is yourself, that's when it frees up a hell of a lot of headspace to do amazing things.
Yeah. It's
Well,
really
that's
interesting,
the sorry, go on.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, but there will be people out there who will say, "Yeah, I get this, but my life's going to be a hell of a lot better if tomorrow there's £1 million in there. So how does that work?" What
Mm.
do you say to them?
Well, so here's the thing. There may be some aspects of life that would be substantively better. Like if you've got a car that is running on bald tires because you can't afford to get them fixed, you get those babies fixed, you're going to have a safer car. Or if you've had, you know, 3 kids, and now the one-bedroom apartment that was fine when you and your partner first got together suddenly is bulging at the seams. Being able to buy a bigger house may absolutely be valuable. I got nothing against money. It's really useful for buying stuff. But what money can't give you is a feeling. It can't give you peace and well-being. It can't give you a feeling of love and connection. It can't give you joy. And here's the thing: a lot of times, the the thing that people are up against is they're actually worried about money, and because they're worrying about money, that feeling of worry is getting in the way of them enjoying the pleasures of the day, the pleasures of the moment,
Mhm.
the and so understanding what money can do and what it can't do, I think is really, really useful. Because here's the other thing: when people are worrying about their money situation, almost always it's future oriented.
Mhm.
So
Would you?
they're
Yeah.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
So
So
would you
they're
say that? Yeah, it's almost you're putting a pause button on your life as well, because okay, it might feel like you're living, but I would classify it because I've done it. I've been there. Sure, we all have at certain points in life. It feels just like existing. So you get up, you're doing your things, but you're not really, like you say, you're not enjoying the very thing that we've been, evolving for millions of years to enjoy, the very moment. Just, simple things.
mm, yeah, and Pete, the way it kind of plays out is that when people are worrying about money, it's almost always worrying about future stuff. And they believe that their feelings in the present, those feelings of worry, are giving them information about future scenarios, future catastrophes, future difficulties. But your feeling is always letting you know about your perception in the present moment. It's never letting you know about a future scenario. And so, ironically and sadly, believing something that's not true, believing that their feelings are giving them, worried feelings are giving them information about the future, actually robs the day of its joy and pleasures. And and then people look for ways to escape from that stress, of course. So then they go, "Oh well, I'll go and have a few pints, or I'll go and
Mm.
not think about it." And then meanwhile, that's all being driven by a misunderstanding.
Yeah. And interesting, we go out and for the very thing that we're wanting to keep hold of, we go and spend more money to fuel the other feelings. So, but like you say, if you just go out, have a really good night out, then the next day you'll feel better. And obviously, you know, you're not going to anyway because you've probably got a massive hangover.
Yeah.
But on top of that as well, it was just the feelings. So, and actually, just by freeing up and realizing that, you're not going to realize that every second of the day, but just by
Mm.
getting a glimpse of that, frees up enough time to be able to focus on what's important.
Sure.
Because all these people
Sure.
who aspire, for example, what would you say to them? So, a lot of the guys in our group, and again, the wider audience will benefit from it. There's a lot of people aspiring to, giving up the rat race, so to speak. And as you said before, a lot of people actually believe they've got DNA to be an employee for
Right.
the rest of their life. But we're actually all evolved and we've got enough, and that's anyone I've ever met on the planet. We've all got what we need to actually go off and start our own business. Obviously, we still need to, you know, put a lot of hours in. And again, you've got to pick your battles. If your business is some impossible idea, then you've got to question the business model.
Was there a question in there?
Yeah, but what would you say to these people who say, well, I'm getting a paycheck and it's just too much. It's too scary. I'll always be under the influence of working for another company because, it's just too much risk in there.
Well, it's so interesting, that word risk. Like, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but life is inherently risky because guess what happens at the end? There's this quote by I think it's Tiny Tim. No, maybe it's Earl Nightingale. He said, "Most people tiptoe through life, hoping to make it safely to death." And so my experience of the whole thing of leaving employment and doing your own thing takes a bit of courage, because the thing about employment is that it 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 gives the illusion of security. I remember when I first went contract, I was maybe 3 or 6 months in, and the HR director called me into his office and he
Mhm.
said, "Hey, this the project I was working on was a 2-year project, and they started to get kind of anxious about what if I get halfway through the project and then I leave because I was the project manager. So they said, 'Oh, Jamie, we'd like to offer you a job and a director level salary and a company car and all that sort of stuff.'" And I was really loving the feeling of freedom and uh, um, possibility that came with doing my own thing. So
Mhm.
I said, "No, thanks. You're good. I'm fine. I'm good. No problem. I'm happy to keep it as it is." And he said, "Well, what about job security?" And I said, "Oh, no such thing. No such thing." I said, companies make people redundant all the time. Companies go out of business. Things happen there. Job security is an illusion. That was really clear to me that it was an illusion by then. And he was like, "Well, what if everyone thought like that?" I'm like, "Well, yeah.
Then
What if they did?"
there'd be
And
amazing
so,
things happening. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so I think here's the thing: there's nothing wrong with employment. I mean, I employ people, and I'm grateful that that's a good fit for a whole
Mhm.
bunch of people. But if your destiny is to do something else, if your heart is on something else, like there's something else that's calling to you, then there are ways to take the risk out of it. So I'll give you an example. My the insight I had in May 98, June 98 was I realized I wanted to become a trainer and a workshop leader and a coach. And I was like, wow, like I'd never had that before. I'd always had this sense of there's something I'm supposed to be doing, or, my job, I was good at it, but it didn't
Mhm.
really feel like my thing. And then I had this real sense of, oh wow, I want to do this. And I knew right then, like as soon as I had that insight, so it's May, June 98, I knew that I wasn't, I was afraid of public speaker. I was afraid of public speaking. I didn't know how to coach people. I had very few of the core skills
Mhm.
that it was going to require to do that. And so I thought, okay, well, I need a plan. I need to put together a plan. So what can I do? I was like, well, I'm going to need to train up. I'm going to need to retrain. I'm going to need to spend time and energy and money on programs. It's like, okay, well, if I were to get a contract instead of being a full time employee, then that would give me more flexibility and more income to invest in training. So I did that. And I did that for 2.5 years. And then in the last year of my contract, I started reducing my hours. So I went from 5 days a week to 4 days a week to 3 days a week to do that while I started building up the new business.
Yeah.
But so and then the first business I created was a partnership with someone I'd met on one of the training courses, and he was a contractor too, and we used that new business as kind of our way of both getting out of the contract game and onto
Yeah.
actually doing our own thing, which we did for a couple of years. But I didn't actually start my first business on my own, Salad, till January 2003. So that was 98, 99, 2000, 1, 2, 4.5 years after I had that insight and
Hmm.
quit my job. It was 4.5 years until I actually started my first business on my own and doing the stuff I was really passionate about. And that may sound like a long time to people, but every step of the way, I was moving in the direction of my dream. And so it wasn't like it was a miserable waiting 4.5 years before I could do the fun thing. It was 4.5 years of learning and practicing and
Yeah.
experimenting and trying things out. So there are ways to de-risk it. But the thing I've noticed over and over again, Pete, is that people try and figure when they're wanting to transition, all too often, people try and figure it all out in their head rather than actually taking some action. And so the thing I've seen again and again and again is that as soon as people start taking action, moving in the direction of their
Hmm.
dreams, it's almost like life moves as well and goes,
Yeah.
oh, okay, he's actually. So I was saying to someone the other night, when you're sitting waiting for it to happen, life kind of goes, oh, okay, we're waiting. Okay, we
Yeah,
can
nothing
wait. Uh,
happens. And I mean,
yeah,
again, it sounds obvious, doesn't it? But what I heard
yeah,
there, Jamie, as well is, there's a few crucial elements there. One is that, you know, when you had this signal, because you didn't have it before, you were like, I really want to do this. It didn't really matter, at the start that you didn't have all the bits in place because you you already decided, okay, that's you could say that there was a bit of a spark, it lit you up. So I think that's crucial for people to hear because if you're getting this signal that that's something that lights you up, then that's a good start. That's one part of it. And the other part is, you mentioned before, it's a transition. And
yeah,
I've made this mistake before. I've had failed businesses and the like because I kind of sat in my hands for a bit. But also, I wanted it to happen right now. And
yeah.
I missed a few elements out that, you've got to spend your time learning what it is you're working on. You've got to grow the business. And also, you still need income in the meantime. So, some people might start a business and it blossoms immediately. But
Mm.
what I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, it takes a bit of time. And also you
It
learn,
often,
and also crucially, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you first started, you had a very clear vision of what you wanted to do, or you had some part. And then all of a sudden,
no,
sorry, go on.
no, go ahead. I want to hear the all of a sudden.
Oh, sorry, I'll reword it. You had an idea, but I'm guessing even 6 months, a year down the line, that it looked very, very different once you were doing it.
Oh yeah, way different. And that's the thing. Your inspiration, that's kind of a sense of direction. And in a way, Pete, I'm still heading in the same direction that I was all those years ago because it was always in the direction of freedom and making a difference to people and passion and that
Mhm.
sort of stuff. So the direction is still the same, but the what it looks like and what I'm doing bears no resemblance to what I first thought I was going to be doing because I was clueless back then. Like if you'd have asked me, it's like, well, I guess be a I'll be a sort of a coach and a therapist in a local therapy center, and that's my business plan. I'll charge people £40 to come and see me for a session, and I'll see them once, and they'll be all sorted, and that'll be great. I was like, but that was good enough to get me started. It was good enough to get me moving. And I tried that like for a bit and I was like, man, that's a hard way of making a living. Let's figure out something different. And so yeah, it's an evolutionary process and it's a learning process, as you said.
And I guess you learn a lot. That's the thing. It's hard for people to see. A lot of it's just having the courage to take that first step. And I think you put it as, I think you mentioned this before to me, that sometimes you just need to be able to see as far as the headlights can see. And I think the analogy you used was driving in fog, huh? So,
Yeah, yeah.
as long as you're taking action and you can see, the part that you need to see in front of you, you don't really need to see the rest of it because, again, that's when it gets to be future thinking. Because,
Mm.
you know, even with the best business plan and strategy, it can still change. And, and you were saying about job security, what resonated with me as well. I always thought, right, I should stay in this job, you know, because it's really secure. Nothing's going to happen. And then when I look back at my life, all the corporates I've worked for, none of them really exist as they do now. Some of them don't exist at all, or they've been taken over. And also, when you talk about technology, in 5, 10 years time, we don't know if, automation, AI, that kind of thing. So a lot of people are going to be sitting on the hands thinking, yeah, if only I could just start a business. So, it's probably better to start now
Well, they
and take
reckon
some
that
action.
as of today, if I remember correctly, the most recent report said that gig economy income represents 35% of the uh, money being paid for, like 35% of the workforce is gig economy stuff. So that's people doing their own thing. And it's estimated to grow to 40 something percent
Mhm.
by 2020. Unbelievable. That's huge. That would have been pretty much unheard of a decade ago.
Yeah.
Um,
And if you were sitting there a decade ago, would you have been able to predict that?
I don't think so. I mean, it's interesting you say that, Pete. I sat down in 1999 and made some predictions for myself about the way the world was going to go. And I thought, no doubt that more people are going to be working from home and, you know, wired and that sort of thing. But I had no idea the extent to which computers and social media and automation would be playing a part in our lives. And as of today, artificial intelligence. Like if I go, Alexa, what's artificial intelligence? It's absolutely
Yeah, I can hear.
okay. That's enough, Alexa. Shut up, Alexa. Shut up. So it it's that's incredible. Like it may not sound that incredible yet, but the fact that that can do that we've got ALEXA, that we've got Siri, that artificial intelligence, like within the last, I think it was 2016, DeepMind in London created AlphaGo, computer and an artificial intelligence that beat the world's greatest Go player.
Mhm.
Okay, but then they did something amazing. So AlphaGo had basically been given thousands of Go games to learn from. So games by great masters. So it kind of figured out the patterns and stuff. Then they said, okay, we're not giving any starting information. They set it to go play chess. In 24 hours, Alpha Zero, which is the program they called it, Alpha Zero had figured out how to play chess and had literally been was a better chess player than all the grandmasters in 24 hours.
Yeah.
That's insane. Artificial intelligence, robotics, and computerization are going to utterly transform the world of work as we know it. And the interesting thing, Pete, is we're just not emotionally prepared for that. Like it doesn't, when I say that, like I'm trying to spark myself into behaving differently and acting differently because I'm exploring this stuff all the time, listening to podcasts about it, all this sort of stuff. And I still don't really believe it. And yet it's going to happen. So it's like, man, it's going to happen. And the more we're able to kind of take ownership of our careers and our livelihoods and our skill sets and the work that we do, the better. Whether that's within an employment context or working for yourself, still like owning your career, owning your brand within the organization, owning the value that you give to the companies you work for or the clients you work with, like really being clear on that. And I contrast that with when I had my first job, and a job was kind of just like the money factory, and I would show up at the money factory and they pay me my wages. I remember meeting someone at just sitting at the same table as them at lunch one day. This is the first job I had. This is working for a publishing company. And I said, "Oh, what do you do?" They say, "Oh, I work for the sales team." I was like, "Oh yeah, what do you sell?" He said, "Well, books." I'm like, "No kidding. Who do you sell them to?" They said, "Well, universities and libraries. That's who all our customers are." I'm like, "No kidding." She's like, "Yeah, that's why you get paid." It's like, "Oh, I thought I got paid to take printer paper off the printer and do the controls at the end of the day and that sort of thing. I hadn't put it together in my head that this company that I worked for was a part of, like, you may be thinking, yeah, you must be pretty dumb, Jamie, but was a part of this kind of financial ecosystem and a part of the economy, and that there was value being generated. I'm astonished at how ignorant I was of that. Just because no one had ever really explained it to me, and I'd never really thought to ask about it. It had never really, no one all the way through school. I
Mhm.
never really learned about money. I mean, I learned to count and learned to make change and stuff like that, but I never money was kind of there when I showed up, like it was part of the world, and I was like, oh, I'll just, yeah, that's what it is. And I think for a lot of people, that's what happens. We just think, oh, there it is, and it's real, and how I
Mhm.
think and feel about it, that's real, and so and we don't really examine it. But actually, money is completely neutral,
Yeah,
and
because money
all of
doesn't have any feelings. No, it's just there. It's paper, zeros and ones. It's
yeah, it's
abstract.
inert.
Yeah.
And so all the qualities we imbue it with, they're all coming from us.
And would you say that, I mean, I think we're coming to, we talk about technology and there's certainly some massive changes afoot. This
Mm,
whole view of how we were, we were coming from a factory side of things. We're coming out of a cycle now, it's a couple of 100 years where
yeah.
that's the thing. You clock in, you clock out, you have a job, all of this stuff. And yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have an employee and all of the rest of it, but that's the thing. I think we're on the cusp of, quite a lot of massive changes. So I think the only thing you can do is really just be open to the possibilities of all of these changes. And also, crucially, not be scared of it because the one thing, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that's constant in our lives is change. But it's the one
Yeah.
thing that a lot of people, the very thing we fear quite a lot when it happens, even though it happens
It's
every day we
coming.
get up, you know?
It's coming one way or another. And I think the changes in society that we're going to see over the next 10 years are going to take our breaths away. We're going to be just like, our heads are going to be spinning to some degree because, man, the information revolution, the computer revolution, the internet, we're right at the very beginning of it. Like the time we're in the first, if it's a century, we're in the first 5 minutes of it. And you ain't seen nothing yet, buddy. It's gonna get weird.
Mhm. And I think a good place to leave it as well is, with that said, on a positive, because there's a lot of unknowns and that's where people can get a bit, fearful and all the rest of it. But there's a hell of a lot of things that we can't even envisage right now because we're just, you just don't know where it's going. But there's a hell of a lot of opportunity out there if you can just
Mm.
be open to it.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I don't see when I said it's gonna get weird, I don't see it as a negative. I
Mhm.
think we're in for a wild, wild adventure,
Yeah, some exciting things.
and it's going to be very exciting, and there are huge opportunities, and no one really knows what's going to happen. Like, there's no I think it's really this is maybe an interesting thing to finish on. Actually, I think it's really easy, especially if we've had the kind of employee mindset for a long period of time, to kind of work on the basis that there are very bright people in control of everything, and they make sure that the jobs are there and everything. They keep everything taken over. No one knows what the hell's going to happen over the next 10 years. It is a wild experiment that we're all part of. The
Yeah.
whole human race, every single one of us, we can all play a part in it as well. I think it's the most exciting time to be alive, and yeah, I feel very grateful to be, able to do what I'm doing and to have these kind of conversations. So it's great to be here, man.
Well, thank you for your time. It's brilliant.
My pleasure, Pete. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Jamie.